I've worked for ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. I've worked for the Australian Securities Exchange, and probably a bunch of others that I can't remember. I don't know anyone with my kind of experience at all. There's no one that's had that kind of experience. It's because of my white hacker ability. Oh God, what's going on? Let's just break the law. I don't know what's going on with Sydney today. What is that shit? Another detour. Get fucked. I'm going home. I don't know what that was. All right. Anyway, yes. Hey, Googie. You probably don't care about this topic. But I've got to. I wrote down the topics for this. I've got to focus on the challenges that Australian banks are contemporary challenges they're going to face. And what's cool for me is I talk about this a lot anyway. It's an actual thing I'm interested in. And what I was really pleased with is the assignment has suggested areas that we should talk about, and they're exactly the areas that I'm concerned about. So me and my lecturer are getting along really well. He's also a banking expert. So instead of wasting my time, which seems to be happening a lot lately, sitting down and writing this stuff out, I'm going to use my Facebook streams and stuff now to write. I'd rather speak this stuff out. I've got repetitive strain injury, so yeah, I'm posting it to my Facebook. If you're not interested, you don't have to watch. So the first topic this is the challenges that are facing Australian banks, and they're real and proven. So the first one is our low interest rate environment. It's on my little list. I don't know if you can hear it on this piece of paper here. So the challenges for Australian banks are there is an economic principle called supply and demand. So the more supply there is, then the more demand there is, or something along those lines. For a bank, or for a whole country, I should say, if they want more business activity, then they lower the interest rates. And what that does, it makes the money cheaper, or people are able to get loans and they don't have to pay back as much interest. So they're more likely to borrow in order to open up a business, which kickstarts the economy. This is Keynes' approach, the Keynesian approach, I should say, Keynes. I always forget how to pronounce his name. We follow the Keynes approach in Australia. The challenge for the Australian banks in the low, I don't know what's going on. I'm just getting in the traffic. The challenge for the low interest rate environments for the Australian banks is we're in a stage now where we need to generate some more business activity. So they would drop the interest rates in response to that. In the GFC period, I think it was up around 4 or 5%, and we simply dropped the interest rates, and that seemed to generate business activity, which I have to prove. Now, currently, our interest rates are below 1%. There's no room to move for our central bank to borrow money to the regular bank. So unfortunately for the banks, that's one of their main challenges. Look at my disgusting mirror. Is they have no room to lower interest rates. So there's no way to lower interest rates to continue to generate our business income. But I'm also going to have to talk about the changes in interest rates and the impacts on the banks on that. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more study on what a low interest rate means for the banks. It means they're less profitable. Banks have a concept called, which we were taught, net interest income. It's the difference between the money lent and the money borrowed for the bank. They take a slice of the action, basically. In a low interest rate environment, that slice is barely there. And I remember seeing it in a graph of the profitability of the banks. It's actually been sliding in Australia. They're finding it more and more difficult to make money. That's the main one. That was challenge number one. Just going to open up my piece of paper. What are you doing reading paper and driving for, huh? Sydney. Waste my time. Wait for some light. The second one is record. Here's my favorite. Record household debt. This is a topic that I talk about a lot. I'm going to have to say it correctly this time. So there's a ratio called debt to income ratio. And what it means is at the end of the week, as an individual in a household, after you've spent all your money on your basics and you paid off your mortgage, how much money do you have left at the end of the week? If it's at 100%, that means you have no money left at the end of the week. If it's at 50%, it means you have 50% of your money available at the end of the week. If it's 25%, that means you have 75% available at the end of the week. So the lower the number in the debt to income ratio, the better it is for your country. I think in America, which is usually average, I think it's about 120, 130. I've got to check that. You want it a little bit above 100 because it shows economic activity. In Australia, it's 200%. We have record, and I mean record, high debt levels. Australia has the most debt in the world, apart from maybe one country, Hong Kong. Yes, where Australians seem to have a large appetite for debt, and we hold huge amounts of debt. So what does that mean in Australian banking terms? For the Australian bank, it seems quite profitable because Australians are holding much more debt, which means the banks are making far more money on interest payments, credit cards, home loans, and whatever else. And because they're borrowing out at such low interest rates, their net income margin is actually still pretty large. The challenge is when it's called default risk, credit risk, which leads to default risk. Because the debt levels are so high, there must be something okay, let me explain what 200% means first. So let's say I earn $1,000 for the week, right? I've earned $1,000 for the week. If my debt to income ratio is 200%, that means I actually have to pay off $2,000 for that week. Well, the figures are somewhere around that. I've got to make sure I quote that correctly. But the 200% means is there's no money left at the end of the week at all. And that's the average in Australia. I personally don't understand how people are paying off their mortgages. I've got no idea. So that's one of the challenges for the bank. They're going to have to manage that. It's a pretty major one. So Australian debt levels are at record highs. And that was actually listed as part of one of the assignment topics. Very cool. What is our second? The third topic, booming house prices. Wow. So Australian banks have a record, very large percentage of their balance sheet. A balance sheet is like all of their assets, all of their money, all the stuff that the bank owns, the stuff that makes them wealthy. The Australian banks, their balance sheet, a very large portion of it is housing. They're not diversified very well. So most of what a bank's value comes from the very price of the housing within the country that it's come from, Australia especially. So this provides a significant challenge for the Australian banks. We learn as well in class it's very leveraged as well, which means the impacts of a falling housing market, which is what we're currently having, are quite severe for the banks. In fact, they're hiding it at the moment. They're hoping that everyone doesn't notice it. So in Australia, we've had a falling housing market for the last year and a half. The houses have dropped just before it peaked again recently, around 10% nationally, which means the bank's balance sheet hasn't dropped 10%. It would have dropped about 20, 30, even more percent because of the size of the housing on their balance sheet. And that's what I've got to check as part of the assignment. So those two factors are huge in my opinion. The fact that people that own the houses or will own the collateral for the houses, the people on the ground floor are heavily in debt in Australia. We're heavily in debt. There's no denying that. People need to be better at paying off their loans. On top of that was a booming housing market. So last year, the housing prices on the balance sheet were high for the banking sector. So any other international investor would have looked at the Australian banking balance sheet. Well, it looks pretty good. You guys have strong housing. If they looked at it today, it's dropped huge. Their balance sheet, not their share price, their real value. It has dropped. It would have dropped a lot. And that's from we had booming housing prices, which is another way of saying they were too high. There was no way an Australian house is worth 1 million Australian dollars on average. Even the sound of that is ridiculous. So you're telling me everyone in Australia that owns a house is a millionaire? They're not. They're not even close to being a millionaire. And that's the problem. And that's what is happening at the moment. The value of the housing is dropping. I discovered today from analysis, I did it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I tried to look for some good factors for the housing market. A lot of the news reporters are reporting that the boom is over. It's not. I just looked at it's gotten a little bit worse actually. And a few factors happened last night, like China's yuan, they devalued their yuan. Iron ore price sank heavily yesterday, like a lot. I really wish I had my trading account open to catch that, but I don't. But it sunk a lot. Iron ore is our major export. That was supposed to protect us and keep the housing market up, and it's not. So unfortunately for Australia, I believe we're in a dead cat bounce. and we're only halfway through a house price crash. Yeah, statistically, I'm fairly certain of that. And it's going to get the trigger would be those two international, basically the trade war between US and China, and the large shots that got fired over the last couple of days, over the weekend basically, and it's only Monday today. So the challenge for the banks, the Australian banks, is a continually dropping balance sheet from their housing, and very likely crisis from it as well. So it's very likely because of the high debt levels of the citizens and the dropping value of the assets under that mortgage, pardon me, that is certainly going to collapse. Basically, people will not be able to afford to pay off their loans, and because of the first point, the low interest rate environment, it's difficult for businesses to make money. So they're going to be laying people off, or people are just going to have to leave the company because the companies are not going to be able to afford them. It all drills back up to the banks and the bank's balance sheet. And this is what we're learning in this particular class. You know, that the banks have a balance sheet that's dropping. It's pretty significant. So I've got to talk about that for 500 words. I think I've said more than 500 words. It's a really hot topic right now. I actually want to do this assignment. So that's one of the factors. Where's my piece of paper? There's two more that I need to talk about. And I'm saying them now so I don't forget. Usually I'll forget or I don't care about the next day. Now I just get to look at a video. It'll be much faster. Read this piece of paper. I shouldn't be reading in the car. God, there's no light. There's absolutely no light. I can't read when there's no light. Fucking hell. There we go. Low wage growth. Oh, yes. My lecturer is very smart, and he's not from Australia as well, but he's picked all the factors that are true in Australia. I've also worked for JP Morgan Chase & Co, and he talks a lot about that company in the class. It's really cool. Fourth factor, challenge for the Australian banks. We don't have to talk about these, but he suggested it. Low wage growth. I don't know if Australians have been noticing this. You should. But our wages have been dropping. Mine have. I'm retired now because I don't get as much money. I'm expected to do 3 times the amount of work, but I get not half. I get less money because we have a lot of international workers that are willing to do a crappier job at a cheaper price. And because of that, and I'm going to prove it in this assignment, I don't care if it sounds racist, we have low wage growth. So if you're a specialist in anything over the last 10 years, you haven't got a pay rise. No one's got a pay rise over the last 10 years. Aggregate, maybe a few people have started earning more money. But unless you've changed jobs and specifically tried to get more money, overall, Australia has not had an increase in our wage. It's very low. That is a significant factor. So the money that people use to pay off their mortgages, at least the legal money, comes from their jobs. If our wages haven't grown, but our house prices have, that's way out of whack. And it draws back onto the first two factors that it's quite dangerous, actually. So there's the fourth factor, low wage growth. The challenge for the banks is it increases the default risk and the credit risk, or the fact that people are less and less and less every day likely to pay off their loans or default on their loans, be it credit cards, houses, and all that stuff, simply because the companies have been paying them any more money, which leads into the low inflationary environment. So apparently, that's not a topic on this, I'm going to talk about anyway. Apparently prices haven't been moving. What has actually happened is all the price movement has been in houses. So the prices have been rising, but all in the housing. And housing is not considered as part of the GDP for the country or the gross domestic product. It stays in the country. We don't export a house. We've tied up all of our money into the houses that we own, expecting magic to make the value go up. And I really mean that. There's no other thing that I can see, no other factor, no other driver other than the weather. We have nice weather in Australia. That's it. Driving that will drive the price of housing up. Nothing, unless we cheat and the government comes out and just changes the rules or does something special because of a low inflation environment and because of the low wage growth. But you should just quit your job, in my opinion, and become a business person. But yeah, workers have been screwed over the last 10 years. Businesses haven't been paying them. And that's a problem for the banks, simply because the loans that need to be paid, which are the vast majorities. I can't remember who they are, but they've got less money to pay it off simply because their wages haven't been rising. This leads us to our final topic. Oh yes, I love this. I love finance. No problems. The Banking Royal Commission. I loved that. I absolutely loved that. So we had what's called a Banking Royal Commission in Australia. From the scandals, we've had scandals in Australia. So what happened, was it 8 months ago? You had what's called a Royal Banking Commission. You're only bringing Royal Commissions on the most serious of things. So the prior one was about child pedophilia in the Catholic religion. I can't think of anything more serious, honestly. It forced me to leave that religion, actually. It's in that category. And what they discovered, the Australian banks have been giving very poor financial advice. They've been being greedy. They've been trying to sell insurance products. They're a bank. What are you even selling insurance for? Insurance products to dead people, insurance products to disabled people, and basically stealing everybody's money and saying that it's fair. Took another country, England, the United Kingdom, to come in, find someone dedicated to the task to blow open this scandal because the banks were so well protected again, and it was discovered that Australian banks have been giving out far too much money, so which has inflated the value of housing, and that's turned into a problem. So people will say that they're earning like $250,000 a year, when in reality they're only earning $40,000 a year or something like that. There's clearly been a lot of lying on income statements, balance sheets from people who have bought houses. That's very true. So the Banking Royal Commission exposed a lot of that. Mortgage brokers approving loans that they shouldn't have, that are too risky, that make... Oh, look, there's Freemason in front of me. There's Freemason symbol on the right. Anyway, yeah, sorry, distracted by the Freemasonry. And, yes, I've forgotten that. The Banking Royal Commission. So it was by Haynes, the Haynes Royal Banking Commission. And they discovered, so as a result of that, which is a challenge for the banks, is now they have APRA, or the Australian Prudential Regulatory Association, on their ass more constantly. Unfortunately, APRA and that came out as well. APRA, or the Money Police, which is ASIC, they're so light-touched. And I've worked for ASIC, remember. I got in trouble at ASIC for being too aggressive. That shouldn't happen at a cop's place. Like, ASIC is the cops. I got in trouble by the Money Police because they were scared of me. And I was talking about the problems ASIC had and why some of their software wasn't working and things like that. But they were pansies. I had to so gentle. And these are the ones that are going to chase the banks. I am not surprised in the slightest that ASIC barely did anything. And that came out as part of the Banking Royal Commission. If they're the Money Police, they're pretty shit at the job. APRA, similar kind of story. I learned from lecturers at my university that Australia is quite small. So when they formed APRA, the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, there was no one there to take the jobs. So the government was saying, we need this Prudential Regulatory, and they formed it and had, say, 100 positions. There was not enough smart people in Australia to fill those positions. So they hired academics who were not professionals. It's different. And what it's resulted in is a light Australian Prudential Regulatory Association, and that came out. So they've been their challenge for the banks now is they've been told you cannot lend out so much money. You've got to have to check your credit risk, and you've got to stop doing so much dodgies. And that's a challenge for the banks now. So people on the ground floor, because of the first points I mentioned, low inflation, low wage growth, very high housing prices, and very high debt to income ratios, the people on the ground floor that own houses are screaming for money at the banks, screaming. Ask any mortgage broker, they're begging, please, please, please give me money. But APRA is telling the banks, do not give these people any more money unless they're credit worthy. And that is exactly the challenge for the banks. A lot of truth is coming out right now that it's an Australian thing. We bullshit our money. And that's what's is happening as we speak. And that's the final challenge for the banks. I believe these 5 challenges are significant for the banks. And that's how I'm going to conclude it. Unfortunately, I do know some more challenges for the banks. I've signed confidentiality agreements, so I'm not allowed to talk about them. But there's like technology challenges and a bunch of other things that are challenging for them as well. Yeah, so those will be the 5 things I'm going to have to talk about. I'm going to, how many words? About 1,500. So, topic 1, just going to read them out again as a summary. We'll finish this topic. Don't worry, I'm not going to crash. Record low interest rates, record household debt levels, booming house prices, low wage growth, and the RBA scandals. And honestly, I agree with the lecturer so much on those areas that they pick that it gives me confidence that I'm not surrounded by people that are clueless, shall I say. At uni I'm talking about here, and homeowners. So yeah, that's the assignment. Unfortunately, I'm going to lead on to imminent crash next. I'm going to just kill this stream, and I'm going to quickly talk about, I think a financial crisis is imminent in Australia. I'm going to chat about it very quickly before I go home and forget about it. It's important. Do a bit of recording. So I'm recording it, so this isn't live. This is recorded, so the quality's a little bit better. I'm collecting gear. Apparently I've been doing it wrong. All you gotta do is collect gear and then scrap it. And you get this expedites, this Titan Resident. You can get pretty high eye level, so you can just run around each day collecting gear, which is a lot easier than what I thought it was. Like killing this guy. Oh well. It gives gold, but I've got to do 4 of them.
Cannot be allowed to wreak havoc on innocent civilians any longer. Take it out.
Plus I've got a new interface.
Such an abomination cannot be allowed to wreak havoc on innocent civilians any longer. Take it out. Such an abomination cannot be allowed to wreak havoc on innocent civilians any longer. Take it out.
It's a massive stun. What's this guy doing? I'll give him a quick heal. God, I'm nearly dead. I'd heal myself, mate. Please vampiric embrace. That'll get us through. He's immune. 29%. So I've changed it up. Tried to make it a bit cleaner. My old one was real bad. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't dislike anything. It's all good. 18%. Oh my god, that guy died. Great. Let me show him how it's done. Sweet, that's the emissary quest done. This one down here. 20 seconds till I can call a bird. Much nicer. Very smooth. This used to be real slow not long ago. There was a problem in Windows. It took me freaking 4 hours to figure it out. It was just a power setting. I've never seen it before.
you can see a lot more of the detail in the recordings. My computer's alright. This is like the food bowl of the new expansion. Storm Song or something. Pick up some gear from the Emissary quest. I'm really just recording it to see what it's like when I upload. See if it's still pretty.
We must overcome this peril. May the sea carry us swiftly.
This is a test. Let me see if it gets jerky during the stream. Because and shit go red. It's a pain in the butt. So I've changed the encoding to software. From AMD to software. I used to use GeForce, which used to work really well. The error is somewhere during the internet broadcast because it looks nice on my OBS stream. Very nice. It's a shame. It could be stuff something I'm going to check out. Yeah, it could be just restreams and stuff. Yeah, it could be just restreams. Test. Around a bit, see how it goes.
A winged beast is feeding my men to its offspring. Give it a belly full of steel for its next meal.
It's not too bad. There's something to think about. Let's check the hardware again. Testing the new stream setup. I'm trying to make things work. Yes, Okay. Guessing I have this new setup. Streaming going on. So I've got the stream going on another PC. Yeah. So I'm gonna change it. Mega Drive. I don't like the spinner in the middle. Let's get up. Okay. I'm gonna put the other one on full screen. It's got plenty of download. It's beautiful. Really beautiful if I'm moving around. Let's see. So, Turkey. Probably look at a relax. We could already check the rain. Yeah, it's waking up. So it's a bit jerky. I can try it again with maybe 30 frames per second. It's not terrible. Twitch stream going up a lot faster than Stars. That's a good sign. Sonic in the background. Get the full volume. It's good so far. All you have to do is jump on a bird. Jump. That's what's easy. Show the 30 frames per second.